Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a truly fascinating journey.
Yeah.
We're looking at an American comedian who, well, kind of revolutionized political satire for a new generation.
Absolutely. Won 2 prestigious Peabody Awards, which is huge in itself.
Huge. And then found himself right smack in the middle of this massive public debate about truth, fiction, and what exactly it means when you deliver it from a comedy stage.
We are, of course, talking about Hasan Minhaj. He's, often called a quadruple threat, writer, producer, actor, host.
He does it all.
Yeah, and he's really known for taking these intense pressures, the second-generation Indian-American experience, the complexities of American politics, and weaving them into these super sharp, very personal narratives.
His career, starting around, 2008, it's been this incredibly rapid climb.
Nonstop, fueled by this sense of credibility, this voice of authority, and then came this dramatic pivot, really, a period where he had to defend his artistic integrity, his whole approach.
And when you look at his style, it's not just one thing, is it? It's this whole spectrum.
Exactly. You've got the classic political comedy, the new satire, like the Daily Show tradition, observational stuff.
But he goes further. Dark comedy, definitely sarcasm.
Oh, yeah. Sarcasm, insult comedy sometimes, even touches of surreal humor. He's not afraid to mix it up.
And the topics are always big. Current events, civil rights, U.S. politics, Indian culture. He just blends the personal and political in a way that, honestly, few others have really managed to pull off so successfully.
So our mission today for this deep dive is really twofold. First, track that incredible ascent. From Daily Show correspondent, one of the best, I'd argue, to hosting his own award-winning show, Patriot Act.
Critically acclaimed.
Totally. But the real core here is digging into that pivotal moment in 2023. That's when his whole concept of emotional truth just collided head-on with journalistic fact, specifically in his stand-up specials.
It raised these fundamental questions, didn't it? About the integrity of political storytelling, especially when those stories are about, experiences of victimhood or social justice.
Precisely. Where does creative license end and, misrepresentation begin, especially for someone with that kind of platform?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Let's unpack his foundations, because you really can't understand his perspective, his lens, without knowing where he came from.
Agreed. He was born in Davis, California, back in 1985. His parents, Najmeh and Seema Minhaj, were Indian Muslim immigrants. They came from Aligarh in Uttar Pradesh.
And right away, there's something really unusual about his childhood, something he minds a lot in his comedy.
Yeah, this is pretty unique. After he was born, his mother actually went back to India for 8 years.
8 years? Wow.
Yeah, to finish her medical degree. So imagine that for almost a decade of his young life, he's primarily raised in the U.S. by his dad, who is an organic chemist, while his mom is literally thousands of miles away finishing her education.
That experience, that separation, and then the eventual reunion, you can see how that would become just a huge source for his material on culture clash, family identity.
Absolutely. His mom did come back briefly, I think about 3 years after he was born, to have his sister in '89. But that long stretch, being sort of split between these two worlds, hearing about traditional Indian life on the phone, but living this fast-paced American kid experience, it gave him this incredibly unique perspective on what it means to be an immigrant or the child of immigrants.
And educationally, he seemed almost perfectly set up for the career he ended up having.
Right. He graduated from UC Davis in 2007, Bachelor of Arts, Political Science. So he had that academic framework, the ability to analyze policy, history.
But the thing that actually lit the fuse for his comedy career wasn't political theory, was it?
Nope. It was stand-up. Pure, raw stand-up energy. He often talks about seeing Chris Rock's 2004 special, Never Scared.
The classic.
Totally. Saw it while he was still in college, and apparently that was the spark. He started performing around San Francisco, just hitting the local stages, trying things out, honing his craft.
And he got some early recognition pretty quickly.
He did. In 2008, he won this competition, Wild 94.9's Best Comic Standing. That was a big deal locally.
Must have been a huge boost.
Oh, definitely. It let him open for some really big names at the time, like Cat Williams, Gabriel Iglesias. That's invaluable stage time.
And then he made the move.
Yep. By 2009, he moves down to Los Angeles, gets involved with NBC's Stand Up for Diversity showcase. And when you look at who he says influenced him, it's a fascinating list.
Who was on it?
The comedy legends, of course.
Yeah.
Richard Pryor, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and the political satire heavyweights. Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, Trevor Noah, who he'd later work with.
Makes sense. He clearly saw himself in that vein, aiming for that kind of politically charged, smart comedy.
But what's really telling, I think, is that he also cites the writer Junot Diaz.
Oh, interesting. The novelist.
Exactly. Citing Diaz shows that from early on, he wasn't just thinking about jokes. He was thinking about blending humor with deep, layered storytelling. Narrative depth, that was baked into his artistic DNA. He wanted to tell powerful stories, not just land punchlines.
And that aspiration to be this sophisticated political storyteller, well, it really set the stage perfectly for his big break.
Couldn't have planned it better.
Which brings us to the moment things really take off. Landing a spot on The Daily Show, a huge leap from the local scene.
Massive.
Yeah.
He joined in November 2014, and history buffs should note he was actually the very last correspondent hired by Jon Stewart before Stewart left the show.
Wow. Talk about timing, getting in right under the wire during a huge transition period for the show.
And he arrived ready to make a mark. The story of how he actually got the gig is pretty amazing, too. Shows his quick thinking.
How did it happen?
Well, he'd sent in some audition tapes, some sketch ideas, but apparently hadn't heard much. Then he gets called in for this crucial audition, needs new material, and he's reportedly kind of panicking because he doesn't have anything ready to go.
Oh no, nightmare scenario for a comedian.
Right. But then fate kind of intervenes. Just days before his audition, like the Friday before Ben Affleck and Bill Maher have that incredibly heated, very public argument about Islam on Maher's show, Real Time.
I remember that. It was everywhere.
Exactly. It was the perfect storm of celebrity, politics, and religion. Minhaj saw the moment, seized on that controversy, and whipped up this sketch called Batman versus Bill Maher.
Brilliant. Topical, edgy, played on pop culture.
And showed his understanding of the nuances of the debate about Islam. That sketch apparently just blew them away, got him the job on the spot.
Incredible. And he stayed for a while.
4 years. Appeared in 103 episodes, according to the records. Really established himself as this sharp, energetic, super charismatic presence on the show.
But he wasn't just staying in the correspondent lane, was he? He started stepping onto bigger stages pretty quickly.
He did. He started hosting major events, getting into the national political spotlight directly. In 2016, he hosted the Radio and Television Correspondents' Dinner.
Okay.
And he used that platform not just for jokes, but to deliver this really serious, pointed condemnation of Congress for their inaction on gun control legislation. That was kind of his first big political statement outside the Daily Show bubble.
Taking a stand.
Definitely. And then came the really big one, 2017. He gets tapped to be the featured speaker at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
The WHCD, that's like the Super Bowl for political comedians.
Absolutely. And this year was particularly high stakes because President Trump was boycotting the dinner.
Right, he refused to go.
Which meant all the media attention, the entire spotlight, was squarely on Hasan Minhaj and whatever he was going to say about the administration, about the press itself.
Talk about pressure. How did he handle it?
He leaned into it. He did the classic political roast, had sharp jokes targeting the president, famously calling him the liar-in-chief.
Didn't pull any punches there.
Not at all. But he also used it as this moment for powerful self-reflection. He made a point of saying, only in America can a second-generation Indian-American Muslim kid get on the stage and make fun of the president.
Yeah.
He put his identity right at the heart of that political moment.
Powerful statement. Did he only go after Trump?
No, and this is important. He challenged the press, too. He didn't just let the journalists off the hook. He reminded them of the seriousness of their jobs, especially in that political climate.
What did he say?
He had that great line where he thanked Woodward and Bernstein for inspiring a generation of journalists.
Okay.
And then immediately added, and I would like to thank Donald Trump for inspiring the next. It was this perfect blend of acknowledging history and issuing this very direct, unforgettable call to action, all wrapped up in a joke.
Wow. That's using your platform.
And while all this is happening, his deeply personal storytelling side is also reaching this massive global audience. This is where Homecoming King comes in.
His first stand-up special.
Right. And this is really where the seeds of that later controversy were planted, even if nobody realized it at the time.
How so? Tell us about the special.
Well, it started as a one-man show, debuted off-Broadway in 2015, and it focused heavily on his life story, that immigrant experience as a second-gen Indian-American Muslim.
So drawing on those early experiences we talked about.
Exactly. Very specific, very emotional stories, often painful ones. Things like the separation from his mother, the complexities of dating someone outside his culture, dealing with racism.
And that became the Netflix special.
Yep, premiered on Netflix in May 2017. They filmed it at UC Davis, his alma mater, which gave it this nice full-circle feeling, a sense of place, and personal history.
And it was huge, right?
Oh,
Critically acclaimed.
immense critical acclaim. It led to his first Peabody Award in 2018.
A Peabody. That's a serious award, not just for comedy.
Exactly. Peabodys recognize excellence in storytelling that makes a real contribution to culture and society. For Homecoming King to win that award, it basically validated his entire approach, blending these serious social issues with deeply felt, intimate personal history. It said, this isn't just comedy, this is important commentary.
So that success, that validation, really solidified the idea that his personal stories, however emotional, were powerful tools for social commentary.
Without a doubt. And that set the stage for his next big move, the one that really cemented his status.
Leaving The Daily Show.
Right. In August 2018, he leaves his correspondent role to launch his very own weekly political commentary show on Netflix. He goes from being part of the ensemble to being the main anchor.
Patriot Act with Hasan Minhaj.
Patriot Act premiered October 2018, and this show really was an innovation in the news satire space.
How was it different?
Well, unlike the typical late-night format with a desk and quick segments, Patriot Act tackled one complex topic per episode, really deep dives into the cultural, political, economic landscape. 40 episodes in total, highly produced, lots of graphics, deeply researched.
And the reception?
Extraordinary. It really transcended the usual news comedy genre. He won his second Peabody Award for Patriot Act in 2019.
Wow, back-to-back Peabodys for very different projects.
Unbelievable. Plus an Emmy, 2 Webby Awards, and one of those Webbies was specifically for a segment called Deep Cuts.
Deep Cuts. Why is that detail important?
Because it wasn't just a clever name, it really reflected the show's methodology. They used data visualization, graphics, long-form analysis to truly drill down into complex subjects, things like the student loan crisis, the politics of Saudi Arabia, fast fashion, big tech. It was political comedy built on what looked like extensive, almost journalistic research.
So this wasn't just quick jokes, it was analysis.
Deep analysis.
Huh?
And that format led to tangible, real-world influence. Huge influence.
Like what?
Well, in 2019, Time magazine named him one of their 100 most influential people in the world. That's major recognition.
Definitely.
But even more concretely, remember that episode he did on the student loan debt crisis?
Vaguely, yeah.
After that episode aired, exploring all the complexities and predatory practices, Hasan Minhaj was actually called to testify before the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services about that very issue, September 2019.
Seriously. He testified before Congress based on his comedy show.
Yes. That's about as direct a policy impact as you can get from a show that's technically entertainment. It positioned him as this authoritative, credible, fact-driven voice on serious issues.
Okay, so Patriot Act builds this image of rigorous, fact-based commentary. But now we connect this to the later controversy. There were issues behind the scenes, weren't there? Even on this show.
Yes, and this is where the narrative gets complicated and maybe foreshadows the later problems. The sources we looked at indicate that even on Patriot Act, a show celebrated for its rigor, there were internal tensions about facts and research.
Tensions how?
Reports suggest that Minhaj, during the writing process for these detailed episodes, sometimes excluded or limited the role of the show's researcher.
Like the researchers? The people digging up the facts.
Exactly. And perhaps more concerningly, there were reports that he could be dismissive of the fact-checkers.
Hold on. If his later defense against the New Yorker piece rests heavily on Patriot Act being the gold standard for factual rigor, how does that square with reports of him sidelining researchers and fact-checkers?
It doesn't square easily at all. It raises significant questions, doesn't it? It suggests that even within that fact-heavy format, there might have been this ongoing push and pull between maintaining the comedic narrative, the punch of the story, and adhering strictly to the verified facts during the creative process itself.
So maybe the performance aspect, the storytelling, was sometimes prioritized even then.
It implies that, potentially, that the pressure to shape the narrative might have sometimes overridden the meticulous editorial checks, at least in the development stages. It hints at a pattern, perhaps, of prioritizing the story's impact over absolute factual granularity, even in a format presented as deeply researched.
And that wasn't the only issue reported behind the scenes, was it?
No. There were also allegations reported regarding the workplace environment. Multiple female producers brought forward claims of gross mistreatment and harassment on the set. Those situations were ultimately settled out of court, but they add another layer of complexity to the show's legacy, suggesting a high-pressure environment that might have had some serious internal problems, ethically speaking.
Right, so a celebrated show, but with these shadows behind the curtain.
Exactly. And it's also kind of funny in a way how the very thing that made Patriot Act feel so relevant, its timeliness, also comes with risks.
How do you mean?
Well, there's this great little example from 2018. Minhaj did a whole segment, pretty funny at the time, making fun of Bitcoin holders. The price then was hovering around like $6,500.
Okay, yeah, peak crypto uncertainty, maybe.
Right, a perfect topical joke for that moment. But then you fast forward to the context of our sources, looking at July 2025, Bitcoin's price was around $117,000.
Ouch. That joke didn't age well.
Not at all, more than 18 times the price he was mocking. It's just a perfect little illustration of the danger of rapid-fire topical comedy. Sometimes the facts on the ground change so dramatically, so quickly, that the original joke loses all its punch or even seems naive in retrospect.
Good point. Okay, so before we get fully into the big controversy, let's quickly ground ourselves in what he did next, his return to stand-up, and a bit more on his personal life. These details are key to the narratives that came under scrutiny.
Absolutely. So after Patriot Act ended in 2020, he went back to his roots. He launched a big stand-up tour.
Which led to another special.
Yes, his second Netflix special, The King's Jester, which came out in 2022. And this one felt different thematically from Homecoming King.
How so?
If Homecoming King was about the immigrant experience and finding his place, The King's Jester really dove into the consequences of fame, the pressure, the scrutiny, the dark side of being this public voice, this cultural commentator. It felt more introspective about his own position.
And he got even more personal in this era, didn't he? Sharing quite intimate details.
Very much so. Let's talk family for a second. He married Dina Patel back in January 2015. They'd been together a long time, since college, about 10 years.
And she's not in show business.
No, she's highly accomplished in her own right. She's a management consultant, holds a Doctor of Public Health degree, a very powerful professional counterpart to his creative world.
And their backgrounds, you mentioned the cultural aspect earlier.
Right. It's an interesting dynamic he often explores. Both are second-generation Indian Americans, but they come from different backgrounds within that. He's Muslim, his family is from Uttar Pradesh, she's Hindu, her family from Gujarat. So there's that interfaith, interregional dynamic layered onto the immigrant experience.
And they have children.
2 kids, a daughter born in 2018 and a son born in 2020. And during the pandemic, they moved out of New York City. Now they live in Greenwich, Connecticut.
We should also mention his language skills.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
He's fluent in Hindustani, both major registers, Hindi and Urdu. That allows him to connect directly with audiences in South Asia, too, which is significant.
Now, you mentioned The King's Jester got very personal. What specifically stood out?
One of the most talked about parts was his incredibly candid discussion about their struggles with infertility.
Really? He talked about that on stage.
Openly. He described the pressure they felt and how eventually his wife convinced him to go get checked out at a fertility clinic. They discovered the issue wasn't with her, it was with him, specifically something called a varicocele.
Wow. That's not something you hear discussed often, especially by men and maybe particularly in certain cultures.
Exactly. It's often considered taboo or hidden. He talked about undergoing a varicocele repair procedure and his willingness to be so transparent about male fertility struggles, using his own vulnerability, his own potentially embarrassing story. It was remarkable. And thankfully, it led to them successfully having their 2 children.
It shows that willingness again, doesn't it? To use deeply personal, even difficult experiences to connect with the audience on sensitive, real-world issues, almost like journalism through personal narrative.
Absolutely. And that emphasis on the power of the personal, sometimes painful story.
Well, it leads us perfectly into the critical conflict that really ended up redefining his public image. Right. The seismic event. September 2023, the New Yorker article drops. Let's dive into the core of this deep dive now.
This is the moment where the credibility he'd so carefully built, especially with Patriot Act, gets directly challenged by the narratives in his stand-up specials. The New Yorker piece laid out allegations that Minhaj had embellished or exaggerated and, in some cases, outright fabricated key details and anecdotes about experiencing discrimination.
And these weren't minor tweaks, were they? These were significant alterations to stories he presented as real experiences.
Correct. And the article gained immediate traction, partly because of Minhaj's initial response to the reporter. He didn't actually deny that the stories weren't 100% factually accurate. He offered a defense, a framework for understanding it.
Okay, so what was that defense? How did he justify changing these stories, especially given his role as this prominent voice talking about racism and Islamophobia?
He introduced this concept, or at least popularized it in this context, emotional truth. That was his term.
Emotional truth. What does that mean?
He explained it like this, and I'm paraphrasing slightly. Every story in my style is built around a seed of truth. 70% emotional truth, this happened, and then 30% hyperbole, exaggeration, fiction. He argued this blend was inherent to the art form of comedic storytelling.
So the feeling, the underlying point about experiencing prejudice was true, even if the specific events he described didn't happen exactly that way.
That was the core of his argument, that the fictionalized details were necessary tools to make the story land, to make the audience feel the emotional weight of the experience, to achieve the comedic or dramatic impact that served the larger truthful theme.
It's a fascinating argument, but let's look at the specific examples the article highlighted, because they are pretty stark, especially given the seriousness of the topics. The FBI informant story, for instance.
Right. On stage, Minhaj told this story about being a teenager, mocking an FBI informant who was infiltrating his mosque community. And as payback, he claimed, he was slammed against a car by police officers.
Okay, that's a powerful image. Police brutality, profiling, direct consequence of speaking out. Very visceral.
Extremely. The reality, according to the New Yorker's reporting based on interviews, was significantly different. A middle-aged man, whom Minhaj and others suspected was an informant, apparently made a show of pushing Minhaj to the ground during a casual game of basketball at the mosque.
Okay, wait, so it went from a shove during a basketball game to being slammed against a car by police.
That's the reported discrepancy. A huge escalation. The core theme suspicion of surveillance feeling profiled might have been emotionally true for him and his community. But the central dramatic event driving that narrative, the police encounter, seems to have been fabricated for the stage story.
That's a major change. And then there was the anthrax story. That one seemed to hit even harder because it involved his family.
Yes, this one arguably caused the most significant damage to his credibility because it involved his child. Minhaj claimed on stage that he received a threatening letter containing white powder, fake anthrax.
Okay, sadly plausible for a public figure, especially a Muslim commentator.
Right, but then he claimed the powder spilled out onto his young daughter, creating this terrifying scenario requiring a rush to the hospital, fearing for her life.
Oh, wow. Dramatizing the endangerment of your own child?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's to make a point about the very real threats Muslim families face, that feels like a really significant creator license to take. What were the reported facts there?
The reporting indicated that, yes, he did receive a threatening letter containing white powder. That part was true. But his daughter was reportedly never exposed in that dramatic way, never required hospitalization related to it.
So the core threat was real, but the direct endangerment of his child was the embellishment.
That's what the article alleges. And furthermore, Minhaj himself apparently told the reporter that his wife, Bina, had contributed some lines or embellishments to that story as well, suggesting it was a collaborative shaping of the narrative, not just his own artistic choice.
Okay, so these revelations come out. What was the immediate reaction? It must have caused a huge stir.
Massive. It sparked this immediate, widespread, and really multifaceted public debate. Because look, Minhaj wasn't just telling knock-knock jokes.
Right. He had built this brand on being an advocate, using his personal stories of suffering and discrimination, to speak out on civil rights issues. That gave him political capital. It fueled the seriousness of Patriot Act.
Precisely. So for critics, the discovery that some of these foundational stories of victimhood were exaggerated or partly fictionalized felt like a deep betrayal of trust.
It wasn't just about lying in comedy. It was about the specific kind of stories he was changing.
Exactly. For people who saw him as a crucial voice in the social justice movement, fictionalizing narratives of discrimination felt particularly damaging. It raised the uncomfortable question. If the specific examples used to illustrate systemic injustice are inflated, does that undermine the larger argument? Does it give ammunition to those who want to deny those injustices exist?
And it brings up that fundamental question again. Can you really separate the comedian telling stories from the political analyst presenting facts when it's the same person, often on the same stage, talking about the same issues?
Minhaj argued forcefully that yes, you absolutely must separate them. About a month after the article, in October 2023, he released a video on YouTube. It was a very measured, carefully produced rebuttal and defense.
What was his main message in the response?
He started with an apology, saying he was sorry for disappointing fans, but he quickly pivoted to standing firmly by his artistic choices. He doubled down on the emotional truth concept.
So he didn't back away from that framing.
Not really. He insisted the embellishments were necessary to highlight the broader, undeniable truths of Islamophobia, FBI surveillance in Muslim communities, and the real threats his family did face. He argued those larger truths were more important than the literal accuracy of every anecdote.
And how did he address the distinction between his different roles, the Patriot Act guy versus the stand-up guy?
That was central to his defense. He drew a very sharp line. He said, essentially, when I'm doing political comedy like Patriot Act, facts always come first. He emphasized the rigorous fact-checking there, his congressional testimony.
Okay.
But, he argued, when I'm doing storytelling comedy like my specials, the lines are blurrier. That's where artistic license comes in. He was basically asking the audience to apply different standards of truth to his different modes of performance. Trust my data on student loans, but appreciate the poetry in my personal stories, was the implicit message.
Did he address the New Yorker reporting directly?
He did. He criticized the reporter, suggesting she had cherry-picked examples only from his specials, without establishing what he called a control group, basically, without comparing his level of embellishment to other stand-up comedians, especially those working in a similar personal monologist style. He questioned if he was really that far outside the norms of the art form.
So a bit of deflection there, perhaps,
Yeah.
questioning the methodology.
Some saw it that way. He did make a small concession, vowing to be more considerate in his future storytelling. But overall, the defense of his artistic intent, his core method, remained incredibly strong and largely unapologetic.
Okay, so we have the expose, the defense.
Yeah.
What happened next? How did this affect his career, his standing, especially in the political commentary world where trust is so crucial?
Well, interestingly, his career didn't just grind to a halt. Some things were already in motion. Before the New Yorker article even came out, he had already done a stint back at his old stomping grounds.
The Daily Show.
Exactly. In February 2023, after Trevor Noah left, Minhaj was one of the guest hosts. That showed the industry, at least at that point, still valued him as a relevant political voice, putting him in that very prestigious rotation.
And how did he address the scandal itself in his work? Did he just ignore it?
Oh no, he addressed it head-on, in the way comedians often do through more comedy. In October 2024, he released his third stand-up special, Off with His Head.
Off with his head. Okay, what did he say?
He directly rebuked the criticism from the New Yorker. He didn't relitigate the facts, but he characterized the whole scandal, the intense debate around it, as fundamentally dorky.
Dorkies.
Yeah, it was a classic comedian's move, right? Try to deflate the seriousness of the criticism by painting the intellectual or ethical debate itself as nerdy, overly serious, maybe missing the point of comedy.
Minimize the critique by framing it as humorless.
Precisely. But strategically, alongside that, he also seemed to make a very conscious pivot back towards more straightforward political discussion, maybe sensing a need to rebuild credibility in the nonfiction arena.
How so?
In July 2024, he launched a brand new venture, a political talk show and podcast called Hasan Minhaj Doesn't Know.
Okay, tell us about that. How is it different?
This platform feels very much like a return to high-level political discourse, moving away almost entirely from the personal storytelling model that got him into trouble. It's interview-based.
Who has he had on?
Right out of the gate, his first episode featured Senator Elizabeth Warren. Since then, he's hosted other major political figures, Stacey Abrams, Senator Bernie Sanders, Congressman Ro Khanna. It's clearly positioning him back as a serious interviewer, a political analyst engaging directly with policymakers. It provides a very clear counter-narrative to the storyteller persona under fire.
Interesting. So rebuilding that political commentator side of his brand. What about other areas? Has he kept up with acting?
Yeah, he's been actively diversifying beyond just hosting. He had supporting roles in some notable films recently, the Jennifer Lawrence comedy No Hard Feelings, the Disney movie Haunted Mansion, both in 2023.
Any upcoming projects?
He's attached to some potentially big ones. He's in the film adaptation of that massively popular Colleen Hoover novel, It Ends With Us. And he's also part of the cast for the new Tron sequel, Tron Ares.
So keeping his foot in the Hollywood door.
Definitely. And he's done significant voice work, too, playing the Riddler in those Warner Bros. Spotify Batman podcasts, Batman Unburied and the Riddler. Secrets in the Dark shows his range.
And any news on the stand-up front? Is he touring again?
Yes, big news there. For 2025, he and another very well-known comedian, Ronnie Ching.
Oh yeah, fellow Daily Show alum.
Right. They've announced a major co-headlining North American tour, and the title is deliberately provocative. Hassan hates Ronnie. Ronnie hates Hassan.
Okay, playing up a rivalry.
Exactly. It signals a full-throttle return to live performance, sharing the stage this time, moving past that intense solo focus of his specials. It suggests he's ready to re-engage with the comedy world directly.
So when we step back and look at this whole arc, this entire trajectory, what's the main takeaway?
It's just a fascinating, maybe cautionary tale for our modern media age, isn't it? You have someone who built this incredible reputation as an almost unimpeachable voice of factual authority, remember? 2 Peabodys, congressional testimony based on Patriot Act's research.
The gold standard?
Right. And simultaneously, he built enormous emotional connection and credibility by taking significant dramatic license with intensely personal, often painful stories in Homecoming King and The King's Jester. The core tension, the explosion point, lies exactly where those two approaches collided.
And the debate really lingers, doesn't it? It's not just about whether he's a talented comedian, clearly he is. The real question is about boundaries. Where do you, the audience, draw the line when a performer uses fabricated or heavily embellished personal suffering as a tool for advocacy on really sensitive social and political issues?
Issues like Islamophobia, surveillance, discrimination. His stated intent was clearly progressive, to combat prejudice, to highlight systemic problems faced by his community. No one really disputes that intent.
But the method?
The methods are the whole issue. Did fictionalizing specifics like the FBI informant clash becoming a police encounter or the anthrax scare endangering his child ultimately undermine the very message he was trying to send? Did those choices, regardless of artistic intent, erode the fundamental credibility needed to be taken seriously on the political stage, especially in an era already rife with skepticism about truth?
It's like the moment you give critics proof of fabrication in one area, does it make it easier for them to dismiss the larger systemic truths you're trying to address?
That's the risk. He inadvertently might have handed ammunition to those who wanted to deny the reality of Islamophobia or surveillance all along.
Which brings us right to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about comedy's role, its potential as a vehicle for social justice. Given that Hasan Minhaj's stated goal was to fight Islamophobia, to shine a light on real threats, does the power of that bigger message, the emotional truth he aimed for, ultimately outweigh the need for strict journalistic fact from that specific storyteller?
Or does blurring those lines, even with good intentions, fundamentally damage the credibility required for effective political commentary? Does it weaken the very causes the storyteller claims to support, especially when trust is already so fragile?